get a picture. I'm coming from a foreign country, never met this Jesus from the Bible, and I hear Americans talking about him. And then I go to this church, and the Jesus is like this hippified Jesus where it doesn't matter what sin I've committed, no matter what drug I'm smoking, he's all cool with everything because his grace abounds. And although his grace does abound, that's not quite the Jesus that I see in the Bible. Then I'd go to another church down the street, and Jesus is the guy that you can never please, the guy that you can never live up to, the guy who's never happy. He's waiting for us to mess up because our sin is so grievous toward him. And I look at the Bible and I'd see a different Jesus than even that. What Jesus do you serve today? You see, I'd like today, I'd like to introduce you to some, for you, maybe an introduction, but present to you the Jesus from the Bible. He's not just a person from our past. He's not the Christ of just some simple history books. He's not the Christ who's relegated to only a baby in a manger. I love Christmas, and I love the Christmas story and all that. But he's more than the Jesus in a manger. Amen. And he's more than Jesus on the cross. The Bible says he stands at the right hand of the Father, and he's making intercession for you and me right now. He's alive. He's active. And he's present. And he cares. And he loves. And he feels. And he has emotions. And he wants for you the best that you can have, and the best that he can give you. He's more than the Jesus relegated to the holidays, used as a marketing tool so Christians would buy things on this of all holidays. He's more than the Christ who some present as a tyrannical maniac who is just waiting to slaughter and murder thousands of people for their sins. That's not the Jesus from this Bible. Who is Jesus from the Bible? I want to just simply say in one word, he is light. He is and was and will be and always will be the light of the world. It sounds trite because we say it so often. We sing about it, light of the world, but he's truly light. I was on a forum one day and I had mentioned that, and some ego-fied professors of the law, if you will, professors of Christianity, they said, well, we know that Jesus was metaphorical light. He's not in reality. I said, I don't know what you're talking about, but Jesus is reality. He's real light to me. And he says, do you think that Jesus breaks the laws of physics? That if he walked into a room, he would light it up? Is he like a light bulb? He's more than 10 million light bulbs. And I was literally in a forum with another preacher with many degrees, more degrees than I have on my thermometer, And he just couldn't grasp it. Jesus is light. Because when I was in my darkness and he came into my life, I changed. Today we celebrate his birth into this world, but I want to present you today the Christ of the Bible. John chapter 12, Jesus is speaking himself. He's talking about himself in John chapter 12. It's toward the end of his life. He's going to quickly be arrested and brought before all these Pilate and Herod and all these guys. But he's frustrated, and you can hear it in his voice. John chapter 12, verse 44. When you have it, say amen. And Jesus is frustrated because the Pharisees were still testing him. His disciples still hadn't understood everything. And in verse 44, he cries out. Now, when Jesus cries out, that word cries out doesn't mean he just raises his voice. It's as if if there was a box, he would stand up on the box and he would literally, from passion and compassion, he would scream out. And he says, when a man believes in me, He doesn't believe in me alone, but he believes in the one who sent me. So what Jesus is saying is that if you want to believe in God the Father, you must believe in God the Son. People say, well, I love God and I believe in God. I don't believe this Jesus. Well, you cannot believe in God the Father unless you believe in God the Son. And then he goes on, he says, when you look at me, you see the one who has sent me, talking about the Father. Then verse 46, he talks about himself. I have come into this world as a light, so that no one who believes in me would stay in darkness. Now notice that. Notice what he says, stay in darkness. Do you know when Christ is not in your life, you live and you are considered in a world of darkness? There are only two types of people in this planet from the perspective of God. Those who are for him and those that are against him. There is no middle ground. There's no gray area. You're either in the light or you're in the darkness. You say, but I'm a good guy. Well, you're a good guy living in darkness. Oh, but I don't have to believe everything. No, you've got to believe this. This is essential. If you can't believe in Jesus, you can't believe in God. And if you don't believe in God, you're not going to heaven. This has eternal consequences. Who is this Jesus from the Bible? He is the Jesus of light in your world of darkness. You say, well, that's kind of tough, man. Don't you know we live in multi-cultural, multi-thinking, multi-religion society, and how can you say that your religion is better than other religions? Are you kidding me? Muhammad didn't die on the cross. Buddha didn't die for my sins. Every religion of this world has us working toward and to please the master. In Christianity, the master came down to serve us. The first thing you need to know, and if you're writing notes, number one is Jesus is a light into your darkness. Jesus is a light for our darkness. I thought I was a good kid growing up. I thought I didn't go to church. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't know much about God. In fact, the first time I went into church, I was already a Christian because God in my darkness came in looking for me and he found me. Hadn't hardly gone to a Sunday. I went to VBS. I went to Sunday school once in a while. And I went to those places for the crafts and the gum and the candy. But sometimes that's what it takes to get a kid saved. But it wasn't until I was in a garage in Ponchatoula. I was drinking elderberry and strawberry wine, and we were playing rock music, and we were terrible. But, I've always wanted to be a famous musician, and I would, anyway, I'm digressing. This guy came into the darkness. He was a preacher, and he came into our darkness, and he told us about Jesus, the light of this world. And as soon as he began to share his faith with us and we began to receive it, it was as if my world began to open up and a light, not literally, but it seemed like a light from heaven shined upon me and I realized I was loved. Jesus is a light in our darkness. You say, well, I don't believe that I'm in darkness. I'm a good guy. Well, you're a good guy in darkness. Jesus is the light. John 1:4, it says, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. You don't have life until Jesus comes into your life. What you have is pretend life. You have man's life. You have fleshly life. You have temporary happiness. You have temporary joy. But you don't find true joy and true life until the light of heaven comes into you, and then you have life. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. It was his life. His pure life coming into me that was my light. John 3:19 says that this is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but men love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Isn't that the truth? Jesus is the light. He comes into my life, and I choose darkness because my deeds are evil. Next verse, John 8:12 says, and Jesus spoke again to the people, and he says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. You'd say your life is dark right now. You need Jesus. John 9:5, Jesus again says, while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. It doesn't matter how black or dark your life is right now, or how long you've been in this darkness, or how uncomfortable it is to imagine yourself coming out of your darkness. Jesus, right now, can change your life in a moment. In a moment. How many of you ever been lonely? Raise your hand. How many of you have ever been scared? Raise the other. How many of you ever been depressed? Just raise both hands. And all of us, and those just three, there's loneliness, fear, and depression. That's a dark place. But when Jesus comes in, he turns the light on that dark place. You don't have to keep suffering any longer. Will you come to the light today? It's kind of like on our porch, we have this light. You know, we live, my wife and I, we have an above ground house with a little porch, and we have the little porch light, and I watch these bugs. These bugs just surround this light. I hate it, I honestly. Sometimes I open a door with bug spray, just kill them all, you know. But there's a lesson that we can learn from that. We are truly people who are attracted to light, just like those mosquitoes and those bugs. Inside of us, there's a longing that when we see pure light, Jesus' light, or especially coming out of a Christian, we want to go there. We want to talk to that. We want to know that Jesus, that pure light. Am I right? Inside of us, there's this longing for better. There's this longing for more. We're not satisfied with darkness, but we give into the darkness. We say, this must be life. Let me try to be as happy as I can in my depression and my loneliness and my fear. So we go to nightclubs where, by the way, it's dark. That just happens that way. We drink a couple of shots. And we do this thing to numb the pain on the end. We hook up with people, and we go to places that are dark. Why do we do that? Because men love darkness. That's our comfort zone, because our deeds are evil. So sometimes we'd rather stay in our darkness than try to enter into the light, because we feel that light will make us uncomfortable. It may be unpleasant at first, but once we jump into the light takes away all the longing from the nightclub or the alcohol, the promiscuous living, because Jesus satisfies the soul more than anything on this planet could ever. In fact, nothing on this planet could ever satisfy the soul. No amount of money, no kind of great car, not a nice house, not great children, although all of my children are great. Nothing satisfies my soul like Jesus. Period. And when I'm not satisfied as a Christian, it's not because he's off, it's because I'm off. Listen to what I'm saying. And there have been plenty of times that I've been saturating this altar with my tears, and you didn't even know about it, because I was alone, I was afraid, or I was depressed, and I was off. It wasn't God. I want to turn your attention to a little story in the Bible. I was in the airport last week coming home on Monday, and 6-hour layover in Miami, and I was praying. I said, God, I have a message to preach Sunday. Give me what you want. And he told me about this story, and I said, are you kidding me? For a Christmas sermon, we're going to read this story, but let's do this. Go to Luke chapter 7, and I get it now. There's no better illustration of darkness coming in confrontation to the light than the story of the sinful woman who anoints the feet of Jesus. Go with me to Luke chapter 7, verse 36. It says one of the Pharisees asked Jesus to come eat with him, and he went to the Pharisee's house and sat down to eat. Now you need to know this as we go into this story here. This Pharisee, he really didn't want to get to know Jesus. We'll find this out a little bit later. He was really trying to trap Jesus. In fact, Jesus was, and a Pharisee, by the way, was a religious person, a religious teacher, a scribe of the law, and they were strict people. So he invited Jesus into his house to sit down and eat. Now you need to understand, I want to paint this picture because you'll get what I'm going to say here in a few minutes. So this guy had this house, and in this house there were these things called open courts, and basically people would have a party. They would sit out in the courtyard, and neighbors would come and just hang out. Not like tailgating or anything like that, but and mostly, more than any time, it was only men that were invited to the party. Are you with me today? Women were not invited at all. But look at verse 37. And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner. Now let me say, if I'm going to describe someone, I'm probably not going to start describing them as a sinner. Do you know that lady with the red dress, long hair, that sinner lady? But that's what the Bible does here. And you say, man, we shouldn't judge. Well, the Bible just said it. She's a sinner. Literally what that means is that she had a profession that made her a sinner. She was a prostitute, and you'll know this in a few minutes. And behold, the woman in the city who was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus was over at the guy's house sitting at a table, she brought an alabaster flask of fragrant oil. She stood behind him weeping and began to wash his feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. And she kissed his feet and anointed them with the fragrant oil. Now, let me just tell you why we know this woman was a prostitute. Well, first of all, Jewish women had their hair up. And if you had your hair down, you were literally like an advertisement to men. I am a loose person. And more than that, Jewish women didn't wear a lot of perfume, and she's carrying around an alabaster box of fragrant perfume. That was a sign of her profession. Since bathing was optional in those days, it would help in her profession to have a little alabaster to cover her stink. I don't know how else to say it. So here's Jesus at this man's house. He's a Pharisee. He's a teacher of the law, and he's sitting at the table. Now, don't think he's like us. We have tables. We could put our elbows on them, and it's illegal. In fact, Jesus put his elbow on the table. That's the only way he could prop himself up, because the tables were low. In fact, he was probably, and I don't know if I could do this, he was probably positioned in this manner. I am in an awkward position. Or kind of like this, just kind of where his feet were kind of behind him, He's leaning, elbows on the table was the rule to eat over there. So this woman, she basically sneaks into this place where she's crashing the party of the Pharisee. Party crasher, She stood at his feet from behind him, weeping. Now, here's what I believe happened here. And it's just like us. Here she is in darkness. Remember we talked about darkness. And here is the light of the world in town. One night only, you know what I mean? And she hears about Jesus. He's been doing miracles. He's been saving people. He's been here. And she's like, I want to go see this Jesus. It's open courtyards anyway. So she's literally just carrying around her perfume, because that's what she does. Her hair down, advertisement, billboard, I'm open for hire, And I know there's kids in the room, so I'm going to be careful. And so she's carrying around her perfume. This right here was her money maker, by the way. Most treasured possession. It would be like for a carpenter's tools. You lose your tools, you lose your work. You can't make money. And she comes in. She wants to get a close look of Jesus. Perhaps, let me just say, she doesn't realize he's the Lord of everything. Maybe she's advertising it. I don't know. But when she gets there to his presence, She stands from behind him. And she can't control the overwhelming feeling of shame and love all at the same time. Isn't that how it is when our darkness comes in contact with his light? It's the overwhelming feeling of unworthiness, but yet acceptance at the very same time. It's, you're not worthy to be here in this room, but you're more than welcome to stay here. It's that feeling. And what does she do? She begins to cry. And she falls to his feet. And as she's kneeling at his feet and she's crying, she notices his feet are dirty. She's probably a little OCD like me. While I'm down here crying, let me go ahead and wash his feet, because these jokers didn't wash his feet when he walked into the room. You see, it was customary that when you're a guest at someone's house, you know, kind of like we take their jackets off, we put it on the bed, hey, would you like something to drink? It was customary in Jesus' day when you walk into a room, a little servant or someone would clean your feet because you have sandals on and walking through sand all day. It was just that, it was a customary thing. Well, the Pharisee treated Jesus disrespectfully. Say, hey, yeah, come on, sit down, put your dirty feet on that couch, that's good. So she's down there, she's crying, uncontrollable emotion. Oh, his feet are dirty. Look at these jokers. And she's pouring out her heart to him. She says, I don't have a rag, but my hair's down. She's cleaning his feet, right? Then, you know, my most treasured possession. This makes me money, Jesus, but I'm going to pour it on you right now. Because you're much more important than my money. Much more important. Do you see the picture? You see, her darkness comes in contact with his light, and that light overcomes her darkness. The overwhelming feeling that I'm unworthy, the overwhelming feeling at the same time of being unworthy, I'm accepted and loved and cherished and important. And her response is really worship. Worship. She's crying, she's cleaning, she's drying, she's serving. She's worshiping the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords with everything that's inside of her. Now, and then the scene changes from a beautiful, beautiful picture that every Sunday morning and really every day of your life, we should be right there with Jesus. Let me just tell you that. I painted that picture because I wanted you to, every day of our life, what we should be doing is working to build the kingdom of God, serving Jesus, washing his feet, drying them with our hair, worshiping. This is the picture of a Christian. The picture of a Christian is not behind a pulpit, dressed in a nice suit. The picture of a child of God is on their feet, on their face, crying before the Lord. I'm unworthy, but I'm accepted all at the same time. And so, therefore, Lord, I'm going to serve you. Scene changes. Verse 39. Now, when the Pharisee, this guy, who disrespected the Lord, when he saw, the voice, by the way, you hear in the back is not God speaking. That's our translator, just so you know. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this spectacle, he spoke unto himself. He says, if this man were really a prophet, he would know the manner of woman that is touching him, for she is a sinner. Isn't that just like religious people? Listen to this arrogant, judgmental statement that comes out of his heart. He determined that Jesus was not powerful. He determined that Jesus was not prophetic. He determined that Jesus was not divine. He determined all of that because of something he thought Jesus should do and was not doing. He thought this prophetic man, Jesus, should just kick her off his feet and say, you know what, woman, you're a sinful woman. That's not what Jesus does, by the way. Now, remember how early on I asked about what Jesus do? Sir, the world has this weird idea of who Jesus is because it's based like this guy. They determined that God should be this way and he's not. They determined that Jesus should do this thing and he doesn't. And that's how they get their view of who Christ is. He determined that Jesus wasn't powerful, divine, or prophetic because he let the woman touch him. I'm going to tell you precisely that is why God is God and Jesus is God, because he welcomed the touch of a sinner. He welcomed the cries of a sinner person. He welcomed that darkness coming in conflict and confrontation with his light. He welcomed it. He knew exactly who she was and allowed it to happen. So why in the world would you stay in your darkness? Why do you feel it's uncomfortable to come to the light? Jesus welcomes the sinner. You remember, he is the one who went to Zacchaeus' home. He's the one who ate at the tax collector's house and was accused of being a sinner for doing so. He is the one who went and touched the lepers when it was illegal to touch lepers. Jesus is the one who went into the cemeteries where these demon-possessed men were living. He touched them, healed them. Jesus is the light of this world, and he will touch our darkness and he will chase it away. You see, he judged that Christ was not truly Christ because of what he thought Jesus should be like. Don't fall into that trap, ladies and gentlemen. Jesus should be this way. He's not going to approve of that. Don't you tell me what Jesus thinks. The Bible already tells me what he thinks. Don't tell me what Jesus should be. The Bible is very descriptive of who he is. He is the light of this world. And although I feel ashamed, I feel welcomed at the same time when I'm in his presence. Second thing I want to tell you, then we're going to lead into a close. So Jesus is a light into your darkness, but the second thing is humans choose darkness over light. Humans love their darkness. I've said it earlier. I want to emphasize this today. You may be in darkness today. Your life, maybe it's a life of sin, shame, or guilt. Depression, maybe you're down, maybe you're sad, maybe you're lonely. Maybe you're wallowing in a place that you know that you're doing it, but you don't want to leave it. I want you to know something. The Bible tells me you love it. You love darkness. In fact, I'll read it again. John 3:19 says, this is the verdict. John 3:19, this is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but men love darkness instead of light because their deeds are evil. Look at this woman. She stood at his feet from behind, weeping. Her emotions got the best of her. It was a good thing. She fell to his feet, began to clean them, wiped the hair, wiped them with her hair of her head. She kissed his feet, anointed them with her most prized possession. She perhaps came out of curiosity, but she left a different person. She carried her darkness to where the light was, and her light overcame the darkness. Maybe that's you today. Maybe all your life you've stood from behind watching Jesus work. Maybe you've stood at a distance in your darkness watching the light happen in other people. And maybe your shame, maybe it's a cognitive thing, maybe it's just a mental thing that you just can't overcome the thought of how evil and how bad and how horrible you are. And here this Jesus, maybe you're just like a guy that says, Jesus has much better things to do than worry about little old me. Let me tell you something for a minute. If you were the only person on this planet, he still would have died for little old you. I can say that with assurity and confidence, knowing the little things that Jesus does in me. And I say, God, are you kidding? Why would you do that? I mean, you got famine in countries, you got this, but yet you're taking care of me. And if there's any, like Paul says, if there's any unworthy person, I am the chief of sinners. You see, you need to get this in your mind. Humans love darkness. But you'll love light even more. See, men are set free when they decide to come into the light. Standing behind. She's ashamed. She's afraid. She decides to come near to God. She was afraid perhaps to take a risk of faith. Maybe that's you today. Maybe you're standing from behind looking at Jesus, knowing that he's calling you, knowing he's drawing you, knowing he's speaking to your heart even now. You're standing from behind. You say, well, yeah, that's good, but when I leave this building, I'll forget everything this preacher says. Yeah, it might be true. But right now, God is calling you to task. And God is calling you to make a decision. He says, here I am. I stand here waiting with my arms open wide. And it doesn't matter. Let me just tell you, it doesn't matter if you're a prostitute or a murderer or a tax collector or a killer of Christians. God saved every one of them in the Bible. There's nothing so bad that you've done where your darkness is too dark that God can't overcome your light, overcome your darkness with his light. There's nothing. On the cross, a murderer, thief gets saved, and Jesus tells him, you're going to heaven today. Who is Jesus? From the biblical perspective, he's simply this. He's light. He's light. He's the light of the world. And this is not just a song. This is the truth. Why is it that our cultures are crumbling before our eyes the more we push God away? Why is it nations are destroyed? Because they've turned their back on God? Why is it that when people stop going to church, their lives just begin to crumble? Then you find them back in church, they get better and they go leave. Because when the absence of God's light is no life at all. In him was life, and that life was the light of man.
Thank you for watching that message brought to you by Cornerstone Church. You know, we care about you even though you're watching this on the internet. We know that the Lord may be touching your heart right now as I speak. So if you have any questions about what it is to know Jesus Christ as a personal Savior, or how do I become saved, what does that even mean? Please feel free to call us at 985-624-8652. You can also reach us on the web at www.ilovecornerstone.com. Thank you and have a blessed day.